Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. So in this video, we're going to go over what we did for the backsplash, what items we used, how long the process took, and how everything went overall. So you could see these are a couple of the items that we bought to make sure that we did this right. This is the grout float that we bought. This was about $7, so you're going to need this to spread your grout. And then we also bought the Polyblend sanded grout. We did go with the color Snow White. We did not want a dark grout line, so I'm glad that we went with Snow White. And this is the Acrylic Pro tiled adhesive. This bucket was about $12, so not expensive at all. So the first thing we did was measure and level everything out. We wanted to make sure that the first row was going to be close to as perfect as we could get. This did take a little time, just to let you guys know, and that is due to, of course, like I've stated before, measurements from one wall to another is not going to be the same. So we tried to really level this out as close as possible. Your first row of tiles is going to be the most important part of this process because it's going to determine how you do the rest of your tiles. And I say that because you're going to be staggering your tile. And as you could see over there in the corner in a second there, we were actually testing out how the stagger would look once we did the first and then the second row. So we took a couple of tiles just to kind of try it out, just to make sure we were doing the right thing as far as how we were going to lay the tile. So that is the first step when determining how you're going to stagger your tiles. So this process was pretty easy. I would say the only thing that would give you difficulty, if anything, is going to be cuts. Cuts that you have to make around corners, cuts that you're going to have to make around your outlets, things like that. So, but putting the tile on and, you know, spacing and all of that, I thought that was pretty easy. And it went pretty quickly, to be honest. The adhesive does dry fast, but they do recommend you waiting 24 hours after you do the adhesive, just to make sure that it is nice and tight and it's not going to go anywhere once you do your grout. So that's just a little tip from me when you are going to do the backsplash. So you guys are probably wondering as well in regards to why we didn't go with a spacer. And here's the thing, the spacer that we chose was a 1/16 grout line. So with that, to be honest, when we started to stagger the first row and the second row, we did notice that it wasn't that much of a difference. So with that, I actually thought that it did look better without the spacer. So that's why we don't have a spacer, just to let you know. You can do a spacer if you want. If you want like a thicker grout line, you can get a bigger spacer if you want. It's all about preference, of course. But this was our preference. We wanted to do it without spacer, especially with the grout line being Snow White. There wasn't going to be that much of a difference or space that was going to show to the naked eye. So I was happy that we went with that choice. So I have seen other people use like a big trowel when they are putting their adhesive on for the tile. You can, however, these tiles are, they're only 3x6. So we did want to make sure that we took our time with each tile and laying it and making sure that it was straight. So if you use like a bigger trowel, I would only recommend that really for big tiles, like when you're doing your bathroom and stuff like that. Like if you're doing like, your tile on your floor or your walls in the bathroom. In those cases, I would use the bigger trowel. But because we were just doing a 3x6 subway tile, I thought the smaller spatula, worked well, and we didn't have to feel rushed in doing the layout as well. Because you don't want to rush, you really don't. Even though this didn't take a lot of time to do, because once we got the first 2 rows, and then we did the cuts around the outlets, it started to flow, and then we were just like laying tile after tile. And then also I want to note for you guys too, I have seen as well at the end, people do add trim to the end, and there is like tile trim. We did think about doing that. However, when we were finished, I was actually happy with the results, and I didn't think we needed that extra trim at the end. So it's a matter of preference, of course. They do have that sold like near wherever the tiles you choose. You will see a trim tile that goes along the end there if you choose to. So we did do a little bit of a debate whether we should go all the way up. As you could see, we were kind of conversating about if we should go all the way up or if we should stay where he was already. I actually wanted to go further up. I thought it looked nicer to go all the way up to the vent instead of keeping it like halfway. As you can see here, I'm just taking a blade and I'm just kind of cleaning up the space in the tiles there. I did this before the grout, and you want to do that because you don't want parts of the tile not to be covered with grout, which can happen. So you just take a little blade and kind of clean up a little bit before you do your grout. As you can see here, look at the directions when you are mixing your sand grout with water, just to make sure you're doing it correctly. I can't honestly remember how much we did. We did follow the directions on the bag, so I do recommend you guys just kind of looking at the bag and seeing how much water you need to mix with the sand. I don't think it was that much, to be honest. You don't need that much water. And I do want to note as well, so when you're using your float grout tool, you kind of want to make sure that you are spreading it at an angle, and you'll actually see him do that in a couple of seconds. So when you're first putting on the grout, you can kind of spread it around on where you're going to need it, but once you actually put the grout in to the space, you kind of see him do it at a 90, well, not totally 90, maybe a 45-degree angle, and that is because if you kind of go straight and flat into putting your grout, you won't get an even coat, and that is due to because if you're going straight up or straight down, you're gonna take out more grout than putting in. So that is just one of my tips there for putting in the grout. You just want to make sure you kind of do it in a kind of like a 45 angle. You don't want to go down and up. And then you can see here, he's just kind of scraping and then putting it onto the spatula that we had there. And this is just to take a lot of it out. He spread more than enough into the lines. So you could see, watch, he's going to do it on that 45 angle. Just so you can kind of see that you're not going up and down when you're actually putting it into the lines. And apologies, but I did not record the part where I went over with a sponge and a rag actually. So after you do the grouting, you just want to go over with a sponge, a clean rag, just to get any excess grout off of the tile. And then you just wait another 24 hours just to make sure it's dry. And then you will go over with a rag and a sponge again just to get more of the excess off, because you actually see a little bit of film on the tile when you're actually waiting for it to dry. So you'll see that, and you just go over with a sponge or a rag, whatever you choose. So after our tile was done, we did have to decide if we were going to extend our butcher block counter up a little bit to where the tile is, because we did have to cover the edges of where the tile and the butcher block met. And that will make sense in a little bit when you actually see when we put these pieces of wood on that space. So luckily we had a piece of the butcher block still available to kind of mess around with. So he cut like these little pieces that we are going to put as trim. He cut these pieces, and basically I'm going to sand them and then put polyurethane on them to match, of course, the look and the feel of the butcher block counter that we already have. And so just to let you know, we did do our measurements first just to make sure we know what pieces we need, and because we didn't want to waste a lot of that extra butcher block that we had. And you never know, because actually we plan on doing a little table in the foyer. That will come a little bit later. That was my plan. I did want to do something nice in that area, just to kind of put a little table with like a basket for like the laundry and things like that. But of course that's down the road. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't wasting any of the butcher block that we had bought previously, because butcher block is expensive. So you can see here I'm just sanding them. I did only sand one side of it. I didn't think I needed to sand the other side because we're just putting polyurethane on one side for this trim. And I don't think I did a video of the polyurethane process in general. I think I kind of showed you guys the results, but I didn't show you what I used and how the process went. All right, so the polyurethane is very strong, just to let you know. I do not recommend you guys doing it inside the house. Your house will smell like chemicals for days. And that is what happened with us when we actually did the butcher block counter in the kitchen. So for this, I definitely told him I wanted to do it outside, just to make sure we were safe and we weren't gonna like pass out in the house. So I'm just kind of stirring up the last bit of polyurethane that we had. We still had a lot left, and it was actually just enough for this process. So that was good. I did add a little paint thinner. I guess that's a preference thing. You don't have to, but I thought we got a better look out of the butcher block when we did put a little paint thinner on it. And just to let you know, I did do 8 coats of this. So after each coat, I did let it dry. I would say maybe, I don't know, really like 2 hours maybe. And then I went back outside and did another coat, waited another 2 hours, then went outside again. So that was a process. It's easy to do because you just just get your cloth, dip it into the polyurethane, and then kind of wipe it. You don't want to put too much pressure on it, but you're kind of just wiping, the wood when you're staining it. But yeah, I did do 8 coats just to let everyone know. And I just want to make, and that was really due because I wanted to make sure it matched the counter as much as possible, and that, as far as waterproofing as well. I wanted to make, and you could see here, because we had to put it behind the sink as well, where the window meets the sink. So I definitely wanted to make sure that this was going to be waterproof. especially when I start washing dishes and everything. So we actually had to do a couple of things as far as the wood trim here for the transition. And I apologize, I didn't record this part. But we did have to actually put something heavy or put something against the trim to make sure it held until it actually dried. So we did have to put a big butcher block piece against it and then clamp it to the counter, just to let you know. And we did have to do that in sections. So we didn't like put everything, all of the trim on and then, clamped it down. We actually did like a piece at a time, just to let you know. So with that, it was easy, but it was a little bit of a process, a waiting process, just to make sure that the adhesive was going to stay for the trim work here. But I'm glad that we did it. It looks really good. I do prefer us doing that wood trim versus tile trim. I think it ties in very nicely. And I'm glad that we went all the way up to the vent. I think it looks a lot better than, trying to do the tile like halfway to make it actually, to me, it looks like more cohesive that it went all the way up to the vent. But I really want to thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate new subscribers. Thank you so much. I do just want to put a little note here. I know we all are going through something, as far as that crazy virus. I do want to say stay safe, self-quarantine, and watch out for each other. All right, thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.